The topic has been picked very well for today's session. As you are aware, we are going to be discussing how far Sikkim has been integrated into the national mainstream in these 50 years while preserving its distinct identity. Joining us today as panelists, I'll go with age first, is Kunal Sengupta. I'm just presuming you are the oldest in our group today. Kunal Sengupta comes with many years of experience in journalism. We know him as the person who was instrumental in setting up, although he joined it a few months later, but he was instrumental in setting up the North Bengal and Sikkim edition of Telegraph. And if any of you is old enough here to remember that time when newspapers started an edition from Siliguri and how special it was for these parts, a lot of that credit goes to Kunalda. Among the journalists, you would know him from all the time that people were on the phone and talking to someone on the desk called Kunalda. So this is him. Print journalists don't get to show their faces much, so today you get to see him. So thank you for joining us, Kunalda, and thank you for Telegraph's Siliguri edition, North Bengal edition. Then we have with us Professor Lama. Professor Mahendra Lama, of course, requires no introduction in Sikkim. He's a development journalist with many years of experience in research. And in Sikkim, we know him for all the policy papers and documents that he has prepared for the governments now for 20 years, nearly. So he knows the region well. Of course, he's from Darjeeling, so there is that as well. So he knows the region, he knows our problems, our issues, our potential very well. He has also seen Sikkim grow in the past. I won't say, have you seen it actually grow? Are you that old that you would have seen Sikkim for the past 50 years? Yes, so 35 at least he studied this region. And then we have Karma Paljor with us. I know Karma since, I think he was still not out of college at that time, but I remember working with him for a special edition that some tourist entrepreneurs were producing in Sikkim, and it surprised me even at that time that such a young person is so keen about journalism. And so it really warms my heart to see him, for having seen him grow in this profession so much. Having worked with Times of India in Bombay, then with CNN, IBN, CNBC before that, then CNN, IBN, and now, of course, something that all of us in Sikkim are very familiar with, East Mojo. He's the chief editor of that venture. It's new media, as we all know, so that's interesting. But of course, if this was some other session, he would have introduced his love for journalism to Richard Attenborough. And the documentaries he saw, I also know him as a passionate aero modeler, and he's done flying on the simulator, claims to have flown planes without having a license. So I don't think he can get arrested for that yet, but that's wonderful. And his beat, as I was telling the other panelists at CNN IBN, used to be civil aviation. I mean, he covered everything from disasters, natural disasters, to everything else. But his beat was civil aviation, which was wonderfully ironic because Sikkim has never had a functional airport. When he was there, we didn't even have an airport. Now we have a runway, but not yet a functional airport. So on that note, we will be discussing, this is something that is really challenging, and this is the longest you'll hear me speak, because now I would like to pass the baton on to the others. But and of course to the panelists, I think these microphones are meant for karaoke singing. So we have to do the rock star bit of having it like facing us close. We can't speak like, so we got to keep the head and speak into it. Otherwise, it's, are we clear? You can hear us, right? So let's, to begin things off, I think I'll start with Professor Lama, because this is something that we were discussing earlier. This being 50 years, I was recently at a session where someone asked the question that, okay, we know that Sikkim is was a protectorate state, but what does that really mean? And the closest that I could come up with was that it was being protected by a bigger power. So if you, very quickly, you could introduce us to what that meant and how that came about. And from there, we'll take on to the post-merger period.
Well, thank you very much, Pema. Am I audible now? Yeah?
I can hear. Is he clear?
Yeah, thank you very much. You know, as far as protectorate status of Sikkim is concerned, it's a very, very interesting story. And you can trace back to early 19th century when the Gorkha conquest from Nepal started affecting most of the Himalayan regions. One of the ways for Sikkim to be protected was to give some kind of lineage to the British India government, the then East India Company, of course. And it was the first Treaty of Tritalia that was in 1817, where the British India government says, okay, we will give you some kind of measure of protection. They did not give a protection totally, but it built confidence among the Sikkimese rulers that, okay, we will give you some kind of measure of protections. Then actually, it was, by 1849, what happened was the two very famous gentlemen, J.D. Hooker and Campbell, came to Sikkim, and they wanted to, because Hooker was a very well-known botanist, and he wanted to cross over to Tibet through Sikkim. But the king here said, no, you can't do that. So
Professor
both
Lama,
of them.
you'll have to keep it slightly closer, I believe.
Yeah? So
yeah, that's better.
both of them were imprisoned, and that changed the entire course. Both of them were imprisoned against the wishes of the British India government, and that changed the entire course, actually, if you really think on a strategic terms. Then British India government said, okay, we will really do something which would affect your suzerainty and sovereignty. And in the first time in 1861, the Sikkim, British India, the Kingdom of Sikkim and British Empire signed a Treaty of Tumlong. Tumlong was the capital of Sikkim then. Then in that particular document in 1861, for the first time, British India government used the term protectorate. And from 1861 to almost 1890, the status was more or less fragile, as what is the status of a protected state or a protectorate. But in 1890, for the first time, there was a kind of an agreement or treaty between British India government and China. And that is where you will find that British India government would assert its position, reassert its position, and declared Protectorate Sikkim as a protectorate in a very, very emphatic manner. And that carries on further, right? And when India became independent, the British India government already had a consul office in Tibet, and that was continued by Government of India, our Government of India after 1947. And in 1950, the Government of India would say that, okay, we will declare all our agreements in the past as null and void, and we will have a new agreement with Government of Sikkim, right? And the protectorate status was continued till at least 1975. So that was the story. So it's a very interesting story about how internal dynamics, right, converged into taking a decision for the king here in Sikkim to seek support from British India government, East India Company, and how external dynamics, the Tibetan invasion, the Gorkha invasion, and several, the Tsarist Russia coming down to Tibet and trying to capture Central Asia, how those converged into a particular, what you call it, a particular channel, and evolved the process of Sikkim as a protectorate. It's a very interesting story. Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, okay. After that quick history lesson on Sikkim's earlier days, let me come to Karma now. It's interesting. I mean, you mentioned Hooker, and Hooker is the person in his books who introduced the world, the scientific world, about the botanical skills of the Lepchas. And there is this really interesting episode where they took a group of Lepcha botanists, experts from Sikkim to Southeast Asia. And that entire expedition was wiped out by cannibals, except the 2 Lepchas who are part of that group who made it back to Sikkim, helped along, of course. So that is the sense of adventure. Why I bring that to you, Karma, now is when we're talking about how much Sikkim has integrated into the mainstream, we are also talking about breaking into the mainstream. So breaking that glass ceiling in a way. And you have had a very interesting career working in Bombay with Times of India. A lot of fresh graduates would pay to be able to work in that house. Then getting into television, which also is something that we didn't have anyone who looked like us in front of the cameras. I don't know why that was. So if you could just quickly talk to us about what that journey was like, what were the challenges, and focusing more on what the current status is. Do we have, I mean, are you a one-off, or do we have more professional journalists entering that field?
I think, you know, I was lucky to be part of newsrooms which were inclusive. So when you set yourself on a trajectory, on a journey, to reach out and be successful in the mainstream, then you need the support systems. So when I started out, even with Times of India, my editor was very supportive. The problem I used to face was usually when I was on the ground. So when I'm on the ground reporting, you know, I reported from the Maratha bastion of Thane for Times of India for a bit. And my first encounter was that, you know, as a reporter, my cameraman was Kedar Bhatt, who was from, you know, he was a Marathi, so he understood the language. So we went to a place where there was an encounter. And the description of the encounter, the person described the entire encounter, took about 20 minutes to tell Kedar what had happened. It was a very colorful story. Then my turn came, so I went with a notepad. I said, "Sir, boliye kya hua?" He says, "Wo aaya, upar se jump mara, police ne goli mara, wo mar gaya." So, like 2 sentences finished. So now, how do I write an entire story based on 2 lines that he has given me? From there, I understood that it's also important for me to integrate further and learn a bit of Marathi. So that's when I started, and I said, "You talk to him in Marathi, I'll try to listen. We will translate whatever." So that's how I started. That's how my understanding of India. And I've traveled. I have traveled across the length and breadth of the country and also abroad. But the remarkable stories that I have done, I have only been able to do when there is a connect. So you talk about me breaking into the national mold. It's also for the people who are there to break in with me and be able to associate. Oh, you are also from India. In CNBC, when I used to go to all the power corridors of Delhi, and that time it was dominated by Bihar and UP. So most of the politicians were Bihar and UP. So they used to call CNBC Morwala channel because the CNBC logo is like a peacock. No? तो आ गए मोर वाला चैनल कर्मा जी तो बताइए आप कहाँ से हैं? So I always used to tell them I am from Fukuoka, Japan, and they used to believe me. But it was easier for me to get in. Another story, when India and Nepal were having a big fight over Vanaspati duty. So there was a big fight between India and Nepal over Vanaspati duty. The Nepali delegation came in, and they thought I was part of the Nepal delegation. So I was also allowed to sit with the Secretary of Nepal and the Nepali delegation. I sat, had snacks, listened to everything. Only after that, Shipra Viswas was the Commerce PIB, the Press and Information Officer, came in and said, Karma, what are you doing here? I said, they allowed me to come. So it has its advantages. When the airports were getting privatized and only the outside the big consultants and airports were allowed to sit in the presentation, I went in with the Malaysian delegation. I wore a suit, I carried a bag, and I went inside. And after I came out, I briefed all the other media what happened, what are the plans to privatize the Delhi and Mumbai airports. So you have to integrate yourself and understand the language, and only then it is possible for you to accept the country to accept you.
Yeah, that is not integration, it's espionage.
So when my colleagues used to ask me, Karma, what do you want? I used to tell them, my alliance lies with my king. If my king were to call me back to Sikkim, I will proudly go back. But I am also a 1000% patriot. I sing the national anthem very loudly. And there lies, and you know, the program started, I said 50 years. I was born in 1975. I have also completed 50 years. So my state and I are celebrating this Golden Jubilee, and I'm very, very happy. And I have nothing but gratitude to my country, India, and I proudly say that wherever I go. And I thank my country for peace, prosperity, growth. Although khatra pani cha, and we have to be aware of those little threats which are there and continue to plug those things which we can talk about later.
Yeah, I mean, there will always be time to talk about those issues. Kunal, Karma mentioned that he benefited from reaching Times of India, which as a policy matter had a very inclusive newsroom. You've handled newsrooms in your career, and especially when you came to North Bengal, covering Darjeeling and Sikkim. From your experience, do you think in media we have to make a conscious effort to be inclusive and have a variety, or did you have one in your newsroom? What was your experience like?
A warm greetings to you all on this occasion.
And
can you hear me? Is it okay?
Yeah.
As far as we are concerned, I remember taking charge of the Siliguri Edition, I think in August 2003, when it was, I think, well over 6 months old already in its avatar as a publication from North Bengal. It was a time when I was a new person in the newsroom, having been a reporter till then. But I had worked with a lot of news editors, and since my days in the Statesman and also in the Telegraph, we had this mantra of what Pema says about inclusivity, which was very important. And when I stepped into the shoes of the news editor of this edition, I was helped to a large extent, I would say almost 70%, by the way the reporters on the ground included me. So that was a two-way thing. A newsroom can never be a one-way traffic between somebody who is within the confines of four walls and those who are in the ground looking at reality, sifting through a lot of information to get to the core of the issue. And to that extent, our reporters from North Bengal, especially Sikkim, turned out to be really wonderful. Let me give you an example. I'm a person from West Bengal, and Sikkim was a neighbor of our state. And I had traveled to Sikkim many times before 2003. I've even been to Sikkim on assignment. I think the first time was in 1992, when Mr. Bhandari was the chief minister. And At that time, we didn't have a reporter in Sikkim or Gangtok, but I did a few stories from here. I went back to Calcutta and did a few stories on Sikkim. But since 92 to 2003, there was a sea change in information coming out from Sikkim, which is a result of, I think, a lot of local initiative in media management and information distribution. And 2003, I think, was the threshold of the internet age. And I think so.
Yeah, we were just progressing from dial-ups to broadband,
Yeah.
I think, at that time.
So I think at that point of time, we were uploading pages from Calcutta to Siliguri via the satellite, I think INSAT something or the other, very high-tech thing. And, but later on, this inclusivity, you know, it doesn't confine itself into a newsroom which is air-conditioned with computers buzzing and, you know, teleprinters ticking. It also includes the reporters who are on the ground, and it includes the people they are reporting on. So I think it is a very important aspect of journalism which cannot be ignored, but unfortunately it is nowadays, given that information is so readily available. And I think we have a tendency nowadays to, you know, go ahead with whatever we have, given the deadlines newspapers and portals and vlogs have nowadays, to go in for the first information report without going into the information first.
Yes, I mean, really, I mean, what you have on stage, I mean, it would be fine for me to say that the two of us are dinosaurs in as much as the profession is concerned, print guys, and Karma is like, thankfully, moving on to new media. Before I move on to Professor Lama, Joseph, could someone from there just tell me when it's half an hour or 40 minutes? Half an hour. Are we past half an hour? Not yet. Okay, so I'll come to Professor Lama. I mean, like, going with the same question, I'm wondering, when we're talking about this breaking into the mainstream, and there I'd like to mention something that Kunal shared with us. So I said Karma and Professor Lama have broken into the mainstream out of character for these parts. Professor Lama studying economy, which no one can accuse people from the hills of being good at. And Karma, like I said, getting into print journalism in the national scene. And which is when Kunal said that, okay, he also has a breaking story because he broke into these regions where he was accepted as a journalist and respected for what he covered. So this is a very interesting panel that I'm getting to be a part of. So thank you for that. Professor Lama, coming to you, if you could tell us now about the current status of people from Sikkim and your experience in academics, do we have enough research? Two-part question. Do we have enough research being conducted on Sikkim and its different aspects? And do we have enough researchers from Sikkim plying their trade outside? I mean, we see a lot of kids doing research in Sikkim, but like you, who went to JNU and did a PhD thesis on a subject that was not immediately from these parts. So do we have enough of that happening? What the current status is like?
Well, thank you.
Closer.
You know,
We got to all imagine that we are doing karaoke.
yeah,
Yeah.
the for us, a major challenge coming from this part of geography, going to Delhi, competing with all the students and faculty members coming from all over the country and plus abroad. One of the major
Professor, I think you have to keep it even closer. Yeah.
One of the major issues which we have kept in mind is how do you keep yourself rooted in your geography, right? And that rootedness actually gives you a lot of strength, both intellectual and spiritual, right? And that's what we did. Like when I went to JNU to study economics in the Center for Center for Economic Studies and Planning. It was so competitive. I studied in St. Joseph's College there. I did my economics honors, then went there. It was so competitive in that classroom, you know. And my classmates were Nirmala Sitharaman, who is the finance minister today, right? We had...
Maybe if you try this. It's not very clear. Closer.
Yeah. So I think it was very, very competitive. You know, students would come from all over the country. You have very bright teachers with degrees from so many universities abroad, from within the country. And there's nothing like Godfather, as Karma rightly said. So you really have to work hard and do some kind of innovative means to really bring forth. So that was a very difficult time, right? And you had to be picked up. And one of the ways to be picked up was to show that you are good in curricular activities also. So when the Asian Games happened in 1982, we were university football team captains, and the cricket captains were picked up by the Asian Games organizing committee, were deployed in the Asian Games. And that is where I met Jaslal Pradhan Dazu. He was representing India in the boxing, right? That was in 82. So looking back, I felt I would say that situation that time was very complex, very, very competitive, and your connectivity to your home, to your geographies were least possible, right? But today the situation is absolutely different. Anyone would like to do well, go into the national mainstream, work hard, and can achieve. And that's what we try to do in Sikkim University. In Sikkim University, we said that we will give you a standard, an atmosphere, and the quality that is available. You can compare it to any universities in the world, right? And as a result of which, today for the first time, JNU has faculty members from Sikkim, right? You have so many students doing so well in different parts of India and abroad also from Sikkim. Many of them are not connected to their geographies and roots, but they are doing so well. So for me, what is very important is, I think we must create an atmosphere, and because our children are absolutely talented. They are talented because they are so very near to nature. They are talented because the very geography, the very environment and cultural ecology would make them so talented. So the only thing is you have to really give them institutional basis, right? Some kind of points, the grounds to take off, and more importantly, give them confidence, oh, you can do this, right? And I think they are doing well. But before I conclude, are you going to give me some time to discuss the Sikkim's economic history?
We'll get to that.
Yeah,
we'll get to that.
So I stop it here. And they are doing so well. Yeah, thank you.
Yes. That kind of brings me to, I'll come to Karma here, is I remember in one of the presentations you made in Sikkim, you introduced us to this term called, which was, I think you were quoting Rajdeep, to this term called tyranny of distance. Because we keep asking this question. Everyone in this audience has that question in their minds, that why is it that national media does not cover Sikkim enough, or does not cover Sikkim properly enough? Here I'd like to mention, which was it, the earthquake, 2011 or 2016 that you were here? 2011. 2011. So I remember at that time, this big earthquake that all of us remember, Karma was here to cover that. And thank God for that, because he knew the place, he knew the people, he could speak the language, he could understand what was lost. Because a lot of other people who came to cover that disaster made a disaster of their reportage. So if you could tell us, given your experience in newsrooms, where you, I am sure, had pitched many story ideas about these parts, what is this big challenge? Why do we not see enough of Sikkim in news media as reportage?
Now, if you look at the current day, we will get no coverage at all because the current media landscape is only about one religion against another. So that is the kind of TRP wars that they are fighting. So if you want to talk about development, if you want to talk about, anything that is good that is happening, nobody is going to cover. Tomorrow, if there is a clash with China at the border, you will see all kinds of journalists come and then there will be no space. So that is what limited, the mental space of a newsroom has shrunk into. So there is no space. So therefore, I keep telling, and this is a problem not only of Sikkim, this is a problem across the Northeast. So we have to tell our story. Hamro story, हामी आफैले भन्नु पर्छ भन्ने चाहिँ एउटा fight हो. This last earthquake, I don't think any of the national media had to come. Nirmal alone reached all corners every day. He was reporting from every place and the other press media of Sikkim. So we were doing a commendable job. Now the only challenge, now this is a big challenge, is that if tomorrow there is a case where the Sikkimis are suppressed, and if we need to reach our voice to the rest of the country and rest of the world, हामीले हाम्रो आवाज बाहिर पुर्याउनु सक्दैन. This is the new reality that has emerged with media which has been turned into lapdog. No. So it's not a problem of only Sikkim. I think it's a problem of the entire country now. So it's not isolated.
The entire country is going through what Sikkim has always been a victim of. This is interesting because I'll come to you, Kunalda, now. Like Karma mentioned, that if there's a big event, of course, like when there was the Tista flood, when there's a GLOF, but when we had the, what was that, with the Bhutan episode, Indian Army, Doklam incident, we didn't have journalists come in. They were all reporting from Delhi with intelligence. Yes, I mean, you are local in that sense, so you have to come. So I'll come to you, Kunalda. Because we've seen when something big happens, they will send the correspondence, they will cover it. So it's incident reporting essentially, right? If there's, like for instance, about 6 years back when there was a big government change in Sikkim, they came to cover it. When there's a flood, earthquake, they come to cover it. But now we should really be looking at, and I'm wondering, you'll be able to fill me on this, is reporting on incident, something big happens is one, they report. Reporting, why is it that we don't see Sikkim enough in the opinion pages? It's not good. I can speak across. The rest of, I guess the audience knows what I was asking. So the question really is that why is it, or what is it that Sikkim is not seen enough in the opinion pages of newspapers? Like, do we not have enough writers, or are the people who make up that opinion page just not reaching out or interested? So if you could, or what could we do to get in there?
It's a very difficult question to answer, but let me assure you, being on the front page is not always good news. So, being on the front page is not always good news, but I would agree and disagree to a certain extent, in the sense that what you just said is that why don't people come in and report from?
No, actually, when something happens, they are coming. My question was, why is Sikkim not in the opinion pages? Why are editorials...
The op-ed pages.
Yeah, the op-ed pages. Why are editorials not being written or explanatory features not coming out enough? Is it something that, like Karma said, tyranny of distance, that the desk doesn't know or care?
I would agree with Karma. I would agree with Karma. But also, I think there is a perception that a state which is kind of on the outside and seemingly very peaceful, very obliging, does not need to be commented upon, very often. So if there is, I can assure you, if there is a political turmoil in Sikkim, there will definitely be op-ed exposure. There will be definitely talk about the history of Sikkim. There will definitely be talk about the politics of Sikkim. But then, again, I think it's a perception of the mainstream newspapers who cater largely to an audience which are their readership. And their readership is not much here. But even if it's online, I would not hazard a guess to, you know, to kind of look at how many hits does the pages from Sikkim, or I think the Telegraph still has a North Bengal Sikkim page on the net. And also in the print media, which is, I think, if you look at the hits it has, I don't think there is enough curiosity left in the people to come and visit those news pages.
Yeah, I mean, that's a challenge that the media space is facing in, yeah, Karma wants to add something.
I just want to quickly come in on your point. So, website analytics, I can pinpoint how many people from Sikkim are reading. So, on my website, if there's a brilliant article on Sikkim, I will get, say, 500 readers from Manipur, because Manipur people read a lot. Around 100 people from Mizoram, they also love to read. Nagaland, Dimapur, they will read. But from Sikkim, 10, 15 people will read the article. Out of the 10, 15 people also, 5 people will just go through the headline, read the first paragraph, 15 seconds they are out. So that is what I wanted to add.
Yeah, and come on, we must be at least 100 people here. We have to beat Manipur in the number of people who read East Mojo and its Sikkim coverage. Because the point really being made here is that a newspaper is only as strong as its audience. Like if we don't have readers who are commenting, correcting and criticizing us, and not newspapers, media, there is no way we'll improve. That's been one of the longest complaints that we've had. You have to keep criticizing us so that we keep improving. Otherwise, we'll remain mediocre. And yeah, and people will suffer. Yes, you wanted to add something. The journalists are taking over now.
In a very anecdotal kind of a form, I would, you know, I experienced this during one of my visits to Sikkim, an official visit. It was a readers' meet, I think in 2006. And it was really chilling for me, sitting there on the stage, to be asked by none other than the late Bibi Gurung, who stared right in my eyes and said, "You treat us like any other district of West Bengal."
I would say not even a district of West Bengal, more like a subdivision when it comes to coverage. You know, one of the problems, I mean, it was wonderful, the North Bengal edition, but one of the problems of having an edition like that was that Sikkim and Darjeeling were then limited to that section and did not make it to the national pages ever, even when there were important stories to be done. But that's a discussion we can have some other day. How are we doing with time? We have another 15 minutes. We'll obviously, I mean, everyone else went over time, so we'll also go over time a bit, I'm sure. Professor Lama, like if we could now, and since we've been told we're running out of time, if we could move on to what we do next. Now, we were thinking of discussing the data that comes on from the 50s onwards. We know that Sikkim in the Himalayan region in the 50s was seen as one of the most developed already, and the state with the most potential, when Bihar and, when Bhutan and even Nepal were quite backward, Sikkim was seen as this well-connected, educated area, right? It already had that potential. So first, tell us quickly how Sikkim has delivered on that potential. And because you have worked on documents like the Human Development Report, which is now what, 20 years old? Yep. It's like 20, even that is 20 years old. You worked on the economic survey. So first telling us how Sikkim has performed to its potential that was seen in the 50s. And then also briefly talk about why is it important to have documents like the HDR and the economic survey? How much does Sikkim need to plan intelligently what it plans to do next, looking into the future?
Well, thank you. Let me add to what Karma and what Kunal Da mentioned about why we do not figure in the op-ed page. Since I have written in almost all the national newspapers in the op-ed page, I know if there are good contributions from Sikkimis, it would do well. I think they would all appreciate and publish it. It could be in Hindu or Times of India or Economic Times. But what I find when I come back to this place, when I go back to my place in Darjeeling, and when I work here is, somehow we have not been able to emphasize on knowledge, right? हाम्रो काम चाहिँ फापरको खेती, दालको खेती गर्ने भयो, ज्ञानको खेती चाहिँ कसले पनि नगर्ने भयो. So one of the slogans in Sikkim University was, now हाम्रो ज्ञानको खेती गर्नुपर्छ, and ज्ञानको खेती गर्नुको लागि you must keep at least one bookshelf full of books. Children would go smell the book, नाकमा लगाएर किताब सुन्नु नै नलेज बढ्नु हो. हरेक किताबको आफ्नो आफ्नै गन्ध र सुगन्ध हुन्छ भनेर, touching itself is a big thing भनेर हामीले भन्छ. So please, readership is very, very interesting. We must really do this. I immediately go to what Pema asked me to do. You know, by the way, Hooker, J.D. Hooker, his counterpart in England was
Darwin.
Charles Darwin. And I have had some documents, they exchanged letters from Darjeeling, Sikkim with Charles Darwin. Can you imagine? Those days in 1949-50. And I have got some of the documents they exchanged during those times. Why Sikkim is in the forefront today is a big story and a very outstanding story. Our Honorable Chief Minister Prem Singh Tamangju, when he was briefing the 16th Finance Commission just about 3-4 months back, he made a very significant statement. He said, Sikkim is the most integrated state in the country, but the least connected state in the country. And absolutely true, right? Because it carried all the messages what the real development policymakers, experts should do. Let me give you some examples of how we started, because I am a student of economic history also. You know, way back in 1974, Sikkim's per capita income was 700 rupees, much higher than what Pema said of Nepal and Bhutan also. Today, our per capita income would be more than 7 lakh rupees. So look what we did in 50 years. Our GDP, gross domestic product, in 1980-81, 5 years afterwards, was 52 crore, just 52 crore. Today our GDP is almost 48,936 crore. You can imagine what is the degree of benefits of what Karma rightly said of integrations between India and no state in the Northeast, possibly in India, has shown such kind of what you call it galloping jumps in the development process. Poverty. I was looking through some of the documents in 1975, and a kind of broad estimates, Sikkim had people between 60 to 70% of the people were below poverty line. That was Ratan Dandekar's calculations and the reports, right? And today, we have 2% of the populations below poverty line, almost 18,000 people. And you will be surprised we are the 4th least poverty-stricken state in India after Goa, Tamil Nadu, and Kerala. Revenue, look at the revenue. I'm just looking through the old documents during 1890s when the first political officer was appointed and the first budget was done. Our total budget that time was total revenue was 20,336 rupees, right? And the most of the 67% of the revenue came from land. And at that time also we had a revenue surplus. Today we have a revenue of almost 3,073 crore of our own. Plan development, you know, I would like to keep all these documents somewhere in Sikkim and let our children study, because the two generations have done after 1975. Say, for example, when the first plan happened, 7-year plan in Sikkim in between 1954 and 60, the total outlay was 3 crore, right? And I was, what was this 3 crore used for? I just wanted to flip through. So when I went to the British India Library in London, they have all these documents, because the J.C. White, the first political officer in Sikkim, gave all these documents to the British India Library. So we could, when I went to this, you'll be surprised that most of these resources were used in transport and communications, because it was for the first time in 1954, no jeepable roads were available within Sikkim. So the first plan of 54-61 used much of the resources in the jeepable roads, right? And the second one was they used it for hydroelectricity development projects. After Darjeeling did the first hydropower project in 1897 in Sidrapong, and Nepal did in 1911, and Chengdu in Sichuan in China did in 1937. Sikkim did for the first time in 1927 is Rangki-Chu, right? After that, it keeps doing this. But you will be surprised. The hydropower capacity of Sikkim, even in 1972, was 3 megawatt. Can you imagine? 3 megawatt. Today, it's almost over 1,500, 2,000 megawatt if the glove had not happened. Therefore, what I also feel is, if you look back, what happened in Sikkim in the last 50 years, we have the best SDG, Sustainable Development Goals indicators in the state. We have the highest number of tourist arrivals. I was just seeing what were the number of tourists in 1974-75. Somebody said it is 12,000. The maximum was 18,000. Today is 15 lakh. So it's a very, very interesting story. But what I would like to mention here is about something about how did it happen. It happened precisely because of 7 layers of integration in Sikkim. Many of us forget that the integration can have several dimensions, right? First was a geographical integration, right? The second was political integrations. All the democratic institutions and democratic practices were ushered into Sikkim. Then the second was constitutional integrations. 371F very clearly shows that we became a very, very, what you call it, inevitable part of the Indian Constitution. Then you have institutional integrations, technological integrations, you had development integrations, and more critically, we had emotional integrations. So today, when we celebrate 50th anniversary of Sikkim's statehood within the Union of India, I think we should celebrate in these 7, what you call it, critical dimensions, and that each dimension would give you absolutely a different versions about how Sikkimese contributed in the integration process with India, rest of India, and how rest of India contributed to the Sikkimese integration process in a kind of a robust and resilient manner. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I've just been told that we are running out of time. I'll come to Kunal first. We are looking at, since we are from media space here, you mentioned that you worked with many journalists in Sikkim while you were stationed, or like when you were looking after the edition in North Bengal. But what should the future look like, right? Karma just mentioned that if tomorrow Sikkim needs to get its voice heard in the rest of the country, it probably does not have the platforms existing or the support systems existing in newsrooms. So, God forbid, something like that happens. We have to prepare for it. What do you think Sikkim needs to do, us journalists, and what do we need to do to make those introductions, to break into the newsrooms, not just as correspondents and reporters, but people at the desk, people taking editorial decisions? What is stopping Sikkim from reaching that, journalists from Sikkim from reaching that level? Or what should it do? What do we need to start doing? I think there are some people from the universities here, so your answer could be directed at them as well. People from? Universities are here, so do we need to prepare better courses? The idea being, how does Sikkim break into the newsrooms where editorial decisions are taken?
Personally speaking, I don't think journalism can be taught. It's not a graduation course or a diploma course. A journalist is someone who has it in him. A journalist is someone who looks around the world, his present surroundings and larger areas, and asks questions and observes. A journalist is someone who talks to people and finds out different opinions about one issue and then sifts through these answers to arrive at one logical, rational conclusion about that thing. So you can have hundreds, this is entirely my personal opinion. I don't have any idea about what these mass communication places teach. They can, I think they teach about media penetration, but I don't think they can build a reporter. A reporter can be built in the newsroom. A reporter can be built in the ground. As I discovered during my interaction with people, the reporters in North Bengal and Sikkim, was that they were, especially during, let me mention the earthquake. I think Bijoy was there with the telegraph, and we were some 600 kilometers away, though we even felt the tremors, and there was some effect in Calcutta as well, and in the districts. But Bijoy became our eyes and ears, and went through that difficult times to get us the precise information of what was happening on the ground. He brought us heart-wrenching stories about survival, stories about bravery, stories about how people became inherently resilient in the aftermath of the earthquake to rebuild. So I think that, anywhere, it's not only true for Sikkim, it's true for any other state or any other corner of the world where journalists have to be some people, a man or a woman, a boy or a girl, who inculcates the idea of questioning the surroundings and getting answers. So I think that is something that has to be, taught to the people who want to come to the profession.
What Kunal is saying very politely is that all of us have to first become better journalists, and then we can break into any newsroom down the line. So coming to you, Karma, given your experience, and a lot of people would see your return with East Mojo as coming back to the roots. But I think even there you are breaking new ground. You didn't come back to Sikkim, you went to Guwahati, which is as alien for a Sikkim person as Delhi or Bombay is. So from your experience, what do you think needs to be done for the fear that you raised? Like Sikkim will need to have more people in the newsrooms for the moment when it needs to be heard. So what do you think the younger people in the audience and also the older? So let's look at it as individually what we need to do and what do the institutions need to provide by way of support for something like that to happen?
So having come back and looked at, I'll just bring us back to the topic. How far has Sikkim been integrated into the national mainstream in these 50 years while preserving its distinct identity? अब यो लास्ट को जुन चाहिँ सेन्टेन्स छ, while preserving its distinct identity, त्यहाँ चाहिँ खतरा छ. There's a lot of danger there. के गर्नु पर्ने हो, हामीले कहाँ हेर्नु पर्ने हो? मैले अब घर भित्र आएर हेर्दा, for me, my first home is India, my second home is Sikkim, and then I go back to Rabangla, which is my village. तर मैले भित्र आएर हेर्दाखेरि चाहिँ what I have seen, number one, which hurts every time I hear it, is the word 371F. है? यति साह्रो carelessly use गर्छ हामीले. It is an article given to us by the Constitution of India. It protects us. It is a sacred article which we all Sikkimis must work together to protect. तर के हुन्छ, अलिकति केही भयो, अलिकति यहाँ कहीँ लाग्यो भने पनि 371F, केही भयो भने 371F भरे भोलि त्यो लगिदियो भने कहाँ जाने हामी? So we have to be careful about that. Now second thing, we are talking about integration with the rest of India. मैले हेर्दा मेरो घरभित्रै disintegration भइरहेछ. Every community यता गइरहेछ, उता गइरहेछ, कता गइरहेछ. हामी सानो हुँदा हामी भन्थ्यौँ सिक्किमिज. अब 50 years मा हामीले त्यो हेर्नुपर्छ. हामी सँगै छ कि छैन? अरे तँ त्यो हो, तँ त्यो, तँ भोटे, उता जा, यो यता भनेर भन्छ. That is one of the issues that I see. As a journalist, as a person who has studied outside, who has worked outside, there we have to come together. अब सरले भन्नुभयो हाम्रो नानीहरु एक्सेल गर्दैछ. तर हाम्रो नानीहरु कति % एक्सेल गर्दैछ? 5%, 2%, 1%. But 99% त घरमै छ नि. उनीहरुले भोलि के गर्ने? Have we thought about it? अब 50 years पुग्दाखेरि चाहिँ I think this is the right time to think about this. कि what will our youth do? हाम्रो youth को लागि चाहिँ भोलि उनीहरुले हामीलाई न्यू खोज्न आयो. ओइ तैले के गरिस्? हाम्रो लागि भने हाम्रोमा जब छ. अब 50 years मा चाहिँ यसको माथि हामीले चिन्तन गर्नुपर्ने हो. अर्को कुरा जहिले पनि हाम्रो नर्थ ईस्ट को हाम्रो यङ लिडर्स कनेक्ट छ. हाम्रो अलग अलग स्टेट को चीफ मिनिस्टर, एमएलएस हामी हुनुहुन्छ. हामी सबैले एउटा एसोसिएसन बनाएको छ. त्यसमा एभ्री टाइम वी गो टु द गभर्नमेन्ट अफ इन्डिया एन्ड से हाम्रो पनि त हिस्ट्री लेख नि त हौ. हाम्रो पनि त हिस्ट्री रेस्ट अफ द इन्डियाले पढोस् न. वी हेभ गट सिग्निफिकेन्ट हिस्ट्री. तर प्रब्लम के छ यहाँ सरले भने चाहिँ वी आवर सेल्फ्स डोन्ट नो आवर हिस्ट्री. अब अर्कालाई कहाँबाट भन्नु जानु हिस्ट्री? यहाँ हामी बसेको कतिजनालाई याद छ हिस्ट्री? मलाई पनि याद छैन. सो वी हेभ टु लुक एट दिस थिङ्स. सो आई थिङ्क इट्स अ पिभिटल मोमेन्ट. अब 50 years भनेर सोच्नु हुँदैन. वी हेभ टु लुक एट दिस थिङ्स and invest in knowledge. Organic पनि गरौँ. सरले भनेपछि चाहिँ अब let us try to grow and harvest knowledge. That is what I want to do.
Right. Yes, that's a good enough note to close. I've just been saying, yes, you want to say something? We've just been like, so quickly.
Quickly, you know, we have 3 significant challenges today in Sikkim for at least next 50 years. First is the traditional threats have undergone a drastic change. Our major concern used to be traditional threat like military threat from China and all kinds of things. Today we are more concerned in the next 50 years would be non-traditional security threats. That includes GLOF, cross-border environmental injuries, genetic piracy, gene piracy. Our genes are taken across the border, converted into genes they like and exported back to Sikkim. Very few people have realized these issues. Our entire cropping pattern, livelihood pattern is going to be affected. But more importantly, I think we should do 4 or 5 significant things in Sikkim. We must use our soft power. We don't have any hard power, right? We have our soft power. We have our food, music, culture, sports, fashion designs. All these things we really have to use it in terms of making a supply chains with Southeast Asian countries, with East Asian countries, and that is a part of Prime Minister's, Honorable Prime Minister's Act East policy. So I suggest 5 critical things which we should do in the course of next 5 years or 50 years. First is, whenever I come to Gangtok, I feel suffocated because it's so crowded. So can we think of an alternative new Gangtok townships? It takes 20 years, 25 years to really build a very resilient, robust, which has a very strong carrying capacity. So I think we should really look forward to that. The second is, let's not bring all kinds of investors. Many of the investors today in Sikkim are all based on what you call the NIIPP, NEIDS or Unnati. That means as long as you give them this relief or that relief, this discount or that kind of facilities, they stay here. The moment they withdraw, they go back. So what we have to do is attract new generation investors. The Vietnamese, the Singaporeans, the Thais, the Koreans, the Japanese are willing to come to Sikkim, right? That's why we have a new industrial policy today in the state. Even if you are able to bring 5 good investors, that would have such a huge demonstration effect in the state. And I think we should do that. My third part is, I think we should now do, yes, we have electricity, but we must do electricity trading now. I was just checking the data. Bhutan generates about 1,600 megawatt, and it earns almost about 1,800 crore per annum by just exporting electricity to India. Now we have a cross-border electricity trading guidelines given by Government of India that you can export electricity among these 4 countries, Bhutan, Nepal, Bangladesh, India, possibly it will be joined by Myanmar. And in that case, Sikkim should be a major critical part in this energy trading issues. My last point is, we must play a major role in the international negotiation process, right? One opportunity is given by TISTA negotiation between India and Bangladesh. 80% of TISTA flows in Sikkim. But when it comes to really representations of negotiations between India and Bangladesh, right? Government of India, West Bengal government, and Bangladesh happens. Why not Sikkim? We have been saying this. Sikkim should be a part of the hydro diplomacy project. The last is, of course, do a huge program on climate change, right? We are at the core of entire climate change dynamics. We have seen that GLOF. When I wrote the Human Development Report in 2001, we have clearly written that Sikkim is going to be a victim of GLOF. It happened after 22 years in 23. But where is the awakening in Sikkim today also? Why not we have a massive climate change center where our graduates, our Buddha Pakas will all participate in this project and say to the global world that we do the real adaptations and mitigations. Thank you.
Yes, thank you to all the panelists. Thank you also for being such a patient audience. I hope the discussions were interesting for you as they were riveting for me. There's a lot of things that were shared today. I hope some of that leads to some policy interventions. And thank you for sharing your ideas. And congratulations, Sikkim, Press Club, IPR Department.
Thank you very much.
And thank you.